Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. I'm Joe. With me, as usual, are both Nate and Garret.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
What we're going to be discussing today is actually some remakes and sequels that I would like to see made into newer movies. Before we get into that, though, we are going to go into just some general listener feedback. And Garret, I think you had something to mention there.
Yeah, so I had one listener got a hold of us, and one thing he didn't remember was that the Terminator was the villain in the first movie. He had acknowledged he'd seen Terminator 2, Terminator 3 a lot. And so when we kind of started talking about Schwarzenegger as the villain, he stopped the podcast, went and watched it, came back, listened to the podcast again, and I think he did enjoy it. He also said it was a pretty violent movie that comparatively to the T2 and T3.
Gotcha,
so
yeah.
that was kind of interesting feedback. That's not just that I thought that obviously other people are also thinking that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we love hearing that feedback too, so definitely keep that coming into us, you guys. We're always happy to address some of those things on our podcast as well. We appreciate you listening. Next thing we'll do is just a little bit in pop culture news. We like to start things off with that too. Nate, I know there were some newer trailers that dropped, some previews. Why don't you walk us through those?
Yeah, a couple of those notable ones. The Spider-Man Far From Home trailers dropped. I think there were two of those. If you love the first film, I think there's going to be a lot of the same kind of humor and action involved with that. And then, the thing that really struck out to me was Mysterio. I think they did a great job of bringing him into the now for a movie setting, and not so much the kind of the comic book origins, but still playing homage to how he started up.
Yeah, and before we go to the next one, I want to ask you guys, because when watching the trailer, Nick Fury's there. Obviously, Spider-Man's there.
Yep, that's correct.
We don't have Iron Man. Is this supposed to be pre-Infinity War or post-Infinity War?
Go ahead, Nate.
A lot of rumors going on there.
Yeah.
I think I saw something today in regards to an end credit scene that somehow people got a hold of it, and it does show maybe Iron Man in the end credit scene. So something obviously must occur between the timeline of the first Infinity War movie and obviously when this one occurs.
Okay.
Definitely.
Obviously, too, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Jake Gyllenhaal joining the Marvel Universe?
It's so hot right now. No, I just think it's a really good adaptation, and he does really well in interviews and try to explain kind of the I don't know, confusion probably isn't the right word, but the motivations of his character as Mysterio in the movie, probably alluding to a plot twist there in the end.
Yeah, I would agree, because a lot of that throughout the comics, Mysterio is, of course, a villain of Spider-Man, and this, it looks like they might have to team up at some point, which I think is going to be awesome. And Jake Gyllenhaal, I think he's incredibly talented, so I'm excited to see what he does with this role, really bring it to life.
Yeah, and I'm not a huge Jake Gyllenhaal fan. Really not, so he doesn't really do much for me. I thought it was really cool the way Nick Fury makes his appearance in that trailer. Obviously, the way he'll make his appearance in the movie.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not too excited for Jake Gyllenhaal, so I'll see it because I think that the first one was great. I think this one's going to be really good too. And they're the way Marvel's going, you can't get there's no reason to not see one of their movies. They're putting out really good movies at this time.
Exactly. Totally agree.
Yeah.
So another one we'll mention is The Watchmen on HBO. They're putting out a series to kind of revamp The Watchmen, the graphic novel. And it's not really, wouldn't call it a teaser trailer, but they show some very quick glimpses into some of the scenes there, where you see a quick shot of Rorschach and, I'm going to butcher this, but Ozymandias as well, and then kind of the police force with these yellow faces on them. So very interested to see the direction that they go with that.
Yeah, and I'm super excited for that. I like the movie a lot. I'm not a big fan of I mean, I don't really read the graphic novel.
Sure.
But really enjoyed the movie. I think with the way HBO's going with shows, they can't miss either. They've put out a lot of successful hits. I've also started watching True Detective, which came out. That was very popular. They kind of rebooted the season 3.
That's right, yeah.
I've only seen the first episode of it. I know they released 2 hours worth. The first hour was great. If you haven't seen that, check that one out. But as far as Watchmen goes, going to be great. It's going to be kind of the replacement, hopefully, because they have to come up with something for Game of Thrones. Because once Game of Thrones is gone, I know that they have a prequel series coming down the pipeline sometime, but that could be years down the road.
Yeah, I don't think we even have it. Do we have a rough timeline on that? I don't even know if we do.
No.
Yeah, so
I think this is their first claim, HBO's first claim for a true superhero series, too. Their first venture into that genre.
Yeah. And it's going to be good. And obviously, Jeremy Irons is a phenomenal actor,
would
and
be
so
amazing.
really excited to see him, especially if he turns out to be
Don Johnson,
one
just
of
to
the
name
villains.
drop another guy.
Maybe you heard of him.
Miami Vice, #1 news show.
Yeah, and Garrett, I know you had a couple other things too you wanted to bring up, also in kind of pop culture news.
Yeah, so I was reading around. I was reading the internet today, and Star Wars had a potential for a game coming out that EA scrapped. And since Joe and I have been really big fans of Red Dead Redemption 2 lately, this open world concept, Star Wars was putting out an open world concept game that you were supposed to be a bounty hunter that would be able to go planet to planet, or a scoundrel, for instance. And they scrapped that. I don't know if they thought it was too big of a project, that they weren't going to be able to deliver it. I know they had a lot of bad press after, on the release of Battlefront 2, just basically trying to take money from everybody. So that was kind of a disappointment, because I think that would be really neat. Open world concept for that type of a game and for that world.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the other one I also read about was the potential for Grand Theft Auto 6. And so far, Rockstar has basically shot down every rumor that people have put out. But the rumors are that it's heavily speculated it's going to go back to that Vice City feel from that famous Miami scene with the Scarface house and that kind of feel. And that you're going to go back and forth between North America and South America. And that's kind of some heavy rumors. So obviously, if Rockstar Grand Theft Auto 5 was a huge success, Red Dead Redemption 2 is an amazing game that we really greatly enjoy.
Absolutely.
So I can only imagine they're going to capitalize on both of these and hit with Grand Theft Auto 6. And again, they don't seem to be able to mess up either, right? They're kind of batting 1,000 right now. So that's basically it in pop culture. If not, like I said, check out the trailers, check out the news on the games, watch True Detective Season 3. So far, it's pretty good.
Excellent. Very good. Something else I wanted to bring up too, Nate, because you brought it up in a previous episode. You'd started playing Diablo again, and I didn't ask you, shame on me, what's your class? Who are you playing as in Diablo?
So, I'm actually trying... when I originally started, I was on the PC, and I went with a witch doctor, because it was such an interesting character. And I really did enjoy that. And it's been probably a couple years since I started to jump back on, and I did it on Council, and I did Demon Hunter, which I have fallen in love with recently.
Yes.
Found a full 5-piece set with the Ring of Grandeur, I think. So
very cool.
I'm running Torment 11 right now, fairly easily. Not fully optimized, but really looking forward to season, I think, 16, which drops here this Friday. So if you have any suggestions for me for something that's easy to level and get some good gear easily with, I'd still consider myself a beginner, but shoot me some advice if you would, please.
Definitely, yeah. Demon Hunter, that was kind of what I was partial to as well. So, huge fan of that class type in Diablo. I'm sure we'll discuss that more in the future, but moving on to what we were planning to discuss with you all today. Once again, remakes and sequels. Personally, this was my top 5. It was kind of hard to narrow the list down, actually.
We're glad you did.
Yeah. I know Garrett, especially, we had chatted a little earlier. I think he'll probably have a couple interesting things to bring up for one of my suggestions, so I'm excited to get to that in just a little bit. Before we delve into what those remakes and sequels are, though, I just wanted to bring up really what makes a good remake in your mind. What makes a good screen adaptation? Even if this is something that isn't remade directly, of course, from an existing property, what about books they're pulling from? What's important to that?
Well, I personally think on a remake, especially if you're taking an adaptation or from a book, obviously trying to stay as true to what the book is always key. And I generally think that the more you stay true to the books, because that is essentially what brings in everybody's imagination, builds it in their own mind, I think you're going to be really successful with a movie. You know, some of the great film adaptations, like The Outsiders, right? Obviously, I'm a big fan of the Harry Potter franchise.
Yeah.
They did a pretty good job of sticking to the books for the most part. And I think that was very successful. I've never read Lord of the Rings. I'm assuming they stick pretty true to the film, or to the book. I just think that, like I said, if there is something already setting the groundwork, don't go away from it, right? We've acknowledged that The Last Jedi for Star Wars, right? There's a canon being built, and they seem to completely 180 on that. We didn't like that. Maybe that's just us being old crotchety people.
Quite possibly, yeah.
You know, be true to what the product is that you're remaking. I think that's very important.
I think one of the biggest mishaps when you're taking something from a novel is your ability to describe something in so many words in that novel that maybe you're not able to get across to the end viewer. And you take some liberties with that end up with these new viewers who have never read the novel, who aren't able to read between the lines and understand what maybe a scene is actually about, or missing little character considerations on what develops them as a person or what their motivations are. And I think that's the biggest struggle when you're converting something like that.
I think those are both great points to bring up. Something, too, between these two things, obviously both can be hugely important to how this is eventually received. But once push comes to shove, is it more important that you are actually getting the spirit of these characters right within their own world and preserving kind of how that world operates within those books that have been created? Or is staying completely true to the plot more important? Do you think people are more critical if the plot diverges or if the spirit of the characters diverge from what they're used to?
That's a tough one, because I think about not just taking an adaptation from a book, but saying remaking a movie.
Yeah.
And I always find that when they either remake a movie or put out a new sequel to a movie, I always feel like the sequels are supposed to have more comedy in them, that they're trying to make them more funny. And that's fine. I'm not against it. I just, like I said, I think the original success of the movie or the book, there's a plot there, there's a character there, there's a story there. I wanted to see that extended. I want to see that same continuity basically go through. Now, as far as to your question, Joe, sorry not to answer it.
No, that's fine.
Do I think the characters are more important, or do I think that the plot is more important? Is that correct?
That is correct. And obviously both are important. I totally get that. But if you had to choose between the two, is that preserving who the characters are, their motives, their personalities, is that actually more important for creating a successful adaptation than the plot of whatever that original book was?
I'll jump in and say that I think it's more important to stay true to the characters themselves, because that's who you stay invested in as the viewer. Not so much what the trials and events that they're going through, as much as you are how you relate to the individuals that are a part of that story.
And I agree. You do fall in love with the characters in stories, and I think that a character can easily 180 and still be true to its character as a character development, which could change the plot, from one movie to another or one book to the other. And I think that that's something that most people would probably, again, recognize. And I think that most people, like I said, we fall in love with characters, right? We like the Harry Potter series. Whether Harry went to school or, did something else, I'd probably still enjoy it the way that it was written. I think that the characters are the most important, and I agree with that. What do you think, Joe?
Definitely. I would agree with both of you. So I think if you can find a way, of course, incorporating those major story beats in there, certainly that's important, but I would be more frustrated after reading a book, falling in love with who those characters are, to see that specific character completely different on the screen, regardless of what they were doing. That would bother me more, rather than, well, they went from A to B this way in the book, and now they're going A to B this way on the screen. I don't really care about that.
Sure.
Is how they're going from A to B true to those characters.
Sure.
That's what I want to see.
Agreed.
And that's something else, too, that really looking at Marvel and DC to a certain extent, I think they've got a great thing going with Aquaman, which just came out as well. I hope they get their feet underneath them and are able to build a successful universe, kind of like what Marvel has done so far. I love comic book adaptations, but does Marvel exist, or I should say the MCU, specifically outside of the comics, within their own kind of weird realm of success? Because if you look at this with so many other remakes, and I'll get to this a little bit later, people fall into this trap of trying to build a world, build the sequels, I should say, so that first movie adaptation they put out there, it's entirely dependent on the future films that might never happen. I think Marvel took a big chance in a way for how they set this up, but they also kept their eye on how each movie needs to be pretty self-contained. Now, they do this better with some of their movies than others. Some feel like they're setting up the next movie, but overall, they've done a great job, I think, of making each individual film kind of its own thing and stand on its own. And, of course, utilizing those end credits scenes, right? They kind of build on what the existing universe is going to lead to next.
Let me ask this, and I might be wrong.
Sure.
I believe Spider-Man came out prior to Iron Man, right? The original Spider-Man?
Are you talking like Tobey Maguire?
Tobey Maguire.
It did, yeah. So early 2000s,
Yep.
I think, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of a pretty family-friendly Spider-Man movie. As far as Iron Man, which really kicks off a change in films altogether, I think it's like 2007. You can really see a difference post Iron Man and this push for these superhero movies.
Definitely.
The reason why you start with Iron Man 2, though, is he's the most similar to Batman, who's very successful in movies, right? You got the rich guy who's human, he's not a god. He's not a monster.
Yep.
He's a human. He's just rich, and he can kind of put on the suit and do what he needs to do when he needs to.
He's more relatable as a viewer.
Yeah, everybody relates to the billionaire, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's always someone we can
as opposed to
relate
Thor, who's throwing lightning bolts out of his hand.
Listen,
I guess it's
and you identify with who you want to identify with. I'll identify with who I want. But that's kind of where I feel like with Iron Man, they were able to capture that essence because again, Batman had fallen off at that point, right?
Yeah.
Batman was very successful under the Tim Burton. It kind of fell off under Val Kilmer. Really fell off under George Clooney. And I think that's where this 2007 kind of superhero push really starts. And I think, again, they just made the smart move. And then they start building the world, right? The cut scenes at the end tie all these films together.
And that's my biggest thing is I think they really... I think Kevin Feige is probably credited with all of this, but... sitting down and taking a huge, big picture view about where all of this is going and the phases of Marvel and planning ahead so far ahead. I mean, I can't even talk about how many billions of dollars are at risk putting all of these movies together and trying to add these little quips in the movies to tie them into other movies and yet still have them be standalone stories on their own as well.
Well, and I think what really goes to its success, though, is compared to other... not necessarily the DC universe, but other open world or other world building that we talk about, right? Mm-hmm. Like compared it to like a Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Comic books have created these individual stories of an Iron Man, of a Thor, of Spider-Man. You can follow, if you just like Spider-Man, you can get an entire career on Spider-Man, right? An entire career on Thor.
Yeah.
You can't really get an entire career on Legolas, right? Or Aragorn. You can't do that. That doesn't necessarily exist. So it's not necessarily that they are doing something that no one has thought of. They just have so much material to work with the individuals, and there is already the base concept for them coming together. It would be harder to try to build these worlds and force these characters together that doesn't already have the groundwork laid. And laid by multiple authors, right? And multiple different stories.
Yes.
I mean, how many times did we talk about, these crossovers where you get, Wolverine all of a sudden runs into somebody, and you're like, that's weird, right? These guys don't ever meet in any movie. But you get to see these crossovers in comic books, and that history is built, and they can just basically pull from that for that success.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think those are great points. And kind of to tie it back, just the importance of the characters, I think that's also worth mentioning. So while there's so many divergent plot lines in these comics, what they're by and large doing, they're capturing the spirit of those comic book characters and bringing them to the screen. And that, I think, has been hugely successful. To call out Superman, Man of Steel specifically, people were upset. Superman snaps Zod's neck at the end, right? They're saying that's out of character for Superman. That kind of caused a little bit of an outcry from it. So I think it's hugely important. Once again, not so much the plot, what would the character do? And keeping true to what that character does. So,
and that's why we all agree that Star Wars stumbles.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, at a later date, we will go ahead and review The Last Jedi and tell you what we really think of that film.
Yeah, very true. But without further ado, I know we've kind of addressed a couple different things now. I want to get into my first remake, so I'm going to alternate a little bit between the remakes and sequels. So, first remake got a lot of popularity, King Arthur. Now, what's unique about King Arthur is that it seems like we get a new King Arthur movie at minimum one each decade, right? It seems like this. Hugely popular. In terms of the overall backdrop of King Arthur and his history, I'm not going to go into it because it varies so wildly depending on the adaptations that you read through, right? They're hugely popular, but you're going to get a lot of different versions of them. Obviously, there's a debate as to whether or not King Arthur really ever even existed. If he did exist, it's almost certainly not going to be exactly like these legendary depictions of him have been, right?
But Merlin did. He was real.
Totally. Yes. Absolutely was. But what do we kind of know about King Arthur, right? If he did exist, I will hesitantly say the most believable historical evidence was that it likely would have been in about the 5th to 6th centuries. He would probably have been a British leader helping defend Britain at the time against the Saxons. This is kind of,
As a former believed to be former Roman soldier.
Yes,
right?
I believe
that
so.
kind of sticks around. So go ahead.
Exactly. So he's helping with this defense of Britain against the Saxons. Obviously, the authenticity of a lot of these things can be called into question. Some historians think we're all wasting our time even arguing about Arthur, which I can kind of understand that perspective as well. Regardless of what your beliefs are on if he existed or not, he's hugely popular and has created a lot of successful movies, some not so successful. And some of those we're going to go into a little bit, actually. The source material is so varied that these adaptations have varied wildly as well. There's one coming out very soon called The Kid Who Would Be King. Looks pretty cool. Looks like a family adventure kind of movie that they're gearing towards things. I believe the lead in this movie is Andy Serkis's son. So the guy who does motion capture, he's motion capture wizard. He's probably Merlin, actually.
He's a wizard in his own right.
Yeah, he's a wizard in his own right, for sure.
You're a wizard, Andy.
You're a wizard, Andy. Yeah. But I thought it was pretty cool that his kid's now starting to become an actor. So it looks like it could be a fun family adventure movie to go to, right? But there's been a ton of other ones. A Kid in King Arthur's Court, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, a little more on that in a bit. That's one of the more recent adaptations. You have Excalibur. That's a hugely popular version of it. King Arthur, specifically with Clive Owen, 2004. So that was also a pretty popular one at the time, although it was met with mixed reviews, I would say. First Night.
My personal favorite.
There you go, First Night. And I wanted to throw this one out there. Not exactly met with, let's say, critical acclaim, but Transformers, The Last Night, pulling some King Arthur inspiration there. I won't bring The Last Night up anymore.
Sword in the Stone, the animated version from Disney, is that?
Yes, also a great one to bring up.
Right.
Yeah, that was based on, I believe it was T.H. White, The Once and Future King, actually, is the novel, like the first book, if you will. From that is what Sword in the Stone was based on. Yeah, great book, and I like that Disney movie too. Overall, though, what do you guys think makes King Arthur just such a persistent figure in mythology? What is it about him? Is it his charisma? Is it the Knights of the Round Table?
Personally, as being a gearhead for Richard Gere in First Night, I think that's kind of more of a story based around Lancelot, right? That story between him and Guinevere and their relationship, which, to be fair, in 2004 King Arthur, they maybe foreshadowed a little bit at the end as Lancelot died. Spoiler alert. But I really enjoyed the idea that they were human, right? Merlin doesn't really play a spot in that one.
Right.
I like the idea that they were just simply Knights of the Round Table. They were like basically protectors of the peace. I really enjoyed that story. I personally, I think it's the Knights of the Round Table for me. Because even going to King Arthur with Clive Owen, the cast of that movie, his knights, Ray Stevenson, Ray Winston, I'm gonna butcher his name. He played the Sheaf in James Bond.
That's right, yeah, Mads Mikkelsen.
Mads
Mikkelsen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Skarsgård's the villain.
That's right.
I mean, they just had a really good cast of people, and I feel like that they brought something. Not only that, Lancelot, what's his name, Ian Gofield. I'm gonna butcher his name too. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's all good.
He's Mr. Fantastic or whatever it is.
That's right. Yep.
Reed Richards.
Reed Richards. Yeah,
so,
there you go.
Again, for that one, and they played heavily on the relationship with those knights as well. Like I said, to me, it's Knights of the Round Table that works more so than, say, maybe the Holy Grail arc.
Sure.
So, Nate, do you have a preference?
A preference for
King Arthur.
I don't have a preference for King Arthur. If I'm going into myths and legends, I really like the Greek and Roman gods. I just never got into the English portion of that, or even the Norse gods in that area. But I really enjoyed Greek and Roman gods. So this wasn't really my taste, my thing.
No, that's totally fine.
Did anybody see the new Legend of the Sword?
I did see that. I liked it. I know it got pretty universally panned, it seemed like. It flopped at the box office. I think this is a perfect example. We talked a little bit about maybe being too overambitious, trying to set up sequels without actually focusing on telling the story you need to tell right now.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been one of its biggest missteps. You don't even have the Round Table built yet. Right? You don't have Merlin.
Right.
You don't have a lot of these other very impactful characters for what... When most people think of King Arthur, a lot of that was absent from it. But it was a great sword and sorcery movie, essentially.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad Charlie Hunnam got work. Yeah. But I don't know if he's the right. I don't know if he's the right guy to be King Arthur. I don't know if he's the right guy to build a series around for these movies. Obviously, very famous from Jax Teller and the Sons of Anarchy series.
Exactly.
And he was great in that. But when I see King Arthur, I don't think of a blonde guy, right, with his little goatee and I don't think of that. To me, I think King Arthur is an old man. Like he's like I said, I like Sean Connery. I think of Sean Connery as King Arthur because I think that he's the king, and I think the knights are, basically the servants, right? The people who are going out to protect the peace, like Lancelot. I think more of Lancelot as the knight that's going to go out there and protect things than I do think of King Arthur as the guy that's out there swinging the sword.
Fair enough. I think that's a great way to look at it. A lot of what I kind of tried to frame a potential remake around was what part of the story do we want to tell? And I think age plays into that. With in First Knight, just as you're saying, it kind of portrays King Arthur as being substantially older, I would say, especially than Lancelot. So I think that's a great observation to make there. Something I thought of, and I don't think this has been done yet. We had Clive Owen's King Arthur movie in early 2000s. That was probably the most realistic, quote-unquote, interpretation of King Arthur, right, if he was someone who actually existed.
Yeah, he's a former Roman general, or at least soldier, who sticks around to basically protect the Pope's wishes of this land to turn on the Pope later anyways, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
What we don't get out of that movie, which is what I didn't like about it, was that mythology, right? You don't have a whole lot of mythological elements coming into play in that version. Is there a way to bridge that gap? Can you tell a story about 5th, 6th century era King Arthur, but infuse it with the mythology of latter centuries? Because I want to say a lot of this, what we think of with King Arthur was when some of these adaptations were actually written, 12th century, 13th century. So when we think of King Arthur, we think knights, swords, shields, but 5th, 6th century warfare was hugely different. They wouldn't have been fighting like chivalry and mounted on horseback with jousting and stuff like that. It just wasn't warfare at the time. So is there a way to bring the mythology to the 5th and 6th centuries with such things as Excalibur maybe being the elephant in the room and make it work?
That's tough. I think you have to keep it more in a, I don't want to say modern context, but probably 1500s. I think you got to bring it somewhere to that degree. Are you talking also mythology as far as the Holy Grail?
Yeah, so that's a great point to bring up because timeline-wise, right?
Right.
5th to 6th centuries would
right.
throw that
off. So, to be fair, Holy Grail shows up in Last Crusade, which is an amazing movie.
Yep,
right?
Absolutely.
So it can be brought in the current. Well, I guess that would have been 1930s, 40s, with obviously Nazis were around.
Yep.
I think you can do it. I think you have to have, like I said, the 14th, basically the 15th or 16th century. I think you can have the knights, because they'll still exist. I think you can have them be searching, but it almost feels like you'd have to take on, it's going to sound bad, almost like a crusade type movie, like a feel of the Crusades of like trying to find this Holy Grail. And you can have the characters like Merlin exist in this, right?
Exactly.
I don't know if he needs to be a wizard, but it can be some form of, I don't know, maybe he just knows how to use powder, right? And like he has all these different types of, chemistry.
Just make him an alchemist in the sense that he understands how to use chemicals.
Yeah, and I think that you can,
and is very knowledgeable and wise.
Right. You can, you can deal with that, and I think that it is possible. Problem is, I feel like you've brought up, is remade all the time.
All the time, admittedly.
And so, if I remember, this is when you're starting with a remake, correct?
I am, yeah. So this is a remake, just specifically since after having recently seen the one, Legend of the Sword of Charlie Hunnam, I'm like, man, I could get behind a successful reboot, successful remake of this.
Do you think this would be better as a remake of a movie, or do you need a series?
I don't necessarily need a series, and here's why. It's actually been done a few different times already as a series. HBO had the show Camelot, I believe 2011. Don't quote me on that, but I think 2011, right around there, is when Camelot was released. They had another show titled Merlin. I believe it was a BBC production. It followed a much younger group of characters. When Merlin was young, King Arthur was very young. So we've had a couple of these adaptations. I would take a solid King Arthur movie, maybe a trilogy, over a TV series of some kind.
Okay.
Would you prefer to see a TV series?
I'm more of a fan these days of TV shows than I am of movies because you can definitely flesh out characters.
Yep.
They can go deeper. You can, bring in more story plot points. You have a lot bigger name actors doing that. I just feel like if you have the right director, the right show, I can get 15 to 20 hours versus 2. And I can really develop this world. right?
Yeah,
and I
very
feel
true.
like that's very important, especially if you're telling a story like this. This is, you need a world built.
Mm-hmm.
And so a 2-hour show to me, or a movie to me, like I said, I don't have any investment in Charlie Hunnam's King Arthur.
Right.
The only one I really liked was Sean Connery's, right? And or the kid in King Arthur's court as a child. Was Rookie of the Year. I just think that there is a world to build here, especially when you bring in things like Merlin, you bring in things like the Holy Grail. That's a lot of mythology. That's some deep stuff. I think that 20 hours is more important than 2.
Cool. Fair assessment.
I'm going to jump in with Garrett on this one. I think you have to do a TV series of some sort with it because of the world building and the mythology around it. And then the other, thought around that is you just need to develop your characters really and get an investment emotionally with them. And I don't think you can do that in 120 minutes. And the kind of the pitfall of doing a movie that is that short is you have so many characters. How can you really be emotionally invested in every one of those and develop them as a character? But yeah, I'm on the series bandwagon for that one.
Cool, and I think that's a great assessment to make too. I would still love to see that, don't get me wrong. I love the mythology behind King Arthur, so for them to kind of reboot as a series successfully, that would be amazing. Speaking of series, my pick for King Arthur, Richard Madden. Robb Stark from Game of Thrones. He's most recently, I would say, in Bodyguard. I haven't seen it yet on Netflix, right? He stars in Bodyguard. Obviously, this would be King Arthur much younger, right? Not Sean Connery aged here, but I think he probably has the presence. He can convey that chivalrous spirit, the nobility that's needed, and he has a little bit of that, I would say, combat ability that would be believable from him as well. Now, that being said, follow that up with Ian Glenn, also, of course, from Game of Thrones. Most notably, I would say, plays Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones, all right? Merlin. I'd love to see him play Merlin.
Okay.
I think that'd be pretty cool. Alexander Draymond, not hugely recognized right now. He's from a show on Netflix called The Last Kingdom. Highly, highly recommend you check it out. I thought of him as Lancelot, right? Someone who's roughly the same age as what Richard Madden would be, so you could almost play up the competitive nature between Arthur and Lancelot as that. I was going to throw out maybe Ava Green as Morgan Le Fay, as Morgana, completely unaware that she has already played this role in the HBO series of Camelot.
Sure.
So that was interesting while I was looking into this a little bit. I thought maybe Margot Robbie, she would be, someone who maybe would play Guinevere.
See, I think with a Margot Robbie, when I would see her, I think of like Helen of Troy.
That's a
right.
Yeah,
I think
that's good too.
Of the face that launched 1,000 ships or whatever it is. I like the blonde, because obviously I think it's Diane Kruger's in the movie Troy.
Yep, that's correct.
I'm just thinking of the blonde, blonde lady playing that position, but I don't know if I see Guinevere. To me, Guinevere's a brunette. I don't know. That's what I see. I just see Guinevere's a brunette.
Is that ever defined? That's a good question.
I have no idea.
I don't remember that.
But that's how I picture her. That's how I picture her in every adaptation. I mean, if you think about the adaptation she has, I don't remember the actress's name who plays her in First Night. Keira Knightley plays her in 2004. To me, she's always been a brunette. So when I think Margot Robbie, I'm thinking if you want to build a world, Helen of Troy, right?
Fair enough.
Guinevere.
Fair enough. Totally understand. I also threw in there Adrienne Palicki as well. She's in the John Wick movies, most recently in Orville as well. Thought maybe she would make a good Morgan Le Fay potentially as well. Okay. Well, these are purely hypothetical, right? So
Okay. So let's vote on this then.
Yeah.
Does this deserve a remake?
I think you got to take some time, let it settle, let the dust settle, let people kind of forget about it, put it in the back of their minds, and then bring it back up as quote-unquote new material. Yeah,
I agree. No joke. I think you need 10 years. I think you need 10 years, let it die, let every adaptation of it go way past. Even this one, like I said, the other thing with this, I'm sure that A Kid Who Would Be King is going to be a very fun, adventurous movie, but general audience doesn't want a child playing King Arthur.
Yeah.
We need somebody, if we're going to build that world. So I think
it's hard to build the action, too, when you have a child as King Arthur.
Yeah, it's hard to take that serious, right?
Yeah.
Especially if, I don't want to see a kid hunting for the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
I have no interest in seeing that. I don't care. I think you need to give it like a good solid 10 years. Let 10 years go. Bring it out for if Netflix is still around, which I'm sure it is, or whatever exists for Netflix in 10 years. Put it out there, do a 20-hour episode or 20-hour show on it. I just think that there's something there,
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually agree with both of you. I want to see it remade, It does need some time. Yeah, absolutely. I think it needs some time. Maybe, like I was saying, it gets remade almost once a decade. Let's wait another 10 years, just like you were saying. Try it again, maybe. See what we can get going.
Yeah.
Moving things along here. Spent quite a bit of time on King Arthur. It's a worthy topic to discuss. I think this one will go a little bit faster. I'm not backed 100% on my thoughts on this one.
Yeah, we're going to sleep during this one.
Yeah, so Master and Commander.
Oh, woof.
Yeah, Garrett's not a fan. I think he might have fallen asleep when he watched it. I love this movie. Nate, have you seen Master and Commander?
The closest I came to watching it was the trailer.
Fair enough.
I bought this movie. I owned this movie. I tried to sell this movie, and they didn't take it.
It's probably because they said, Garrett, this is such a good movie. We can't take this away from you.
They said, you give me $5 and I'll take your movie from you.
Yes. It felt like that scene in, what was it, Vegas Vacation. Mr. Griswold, why don't you just go out back and I'll kick you in the nuts. This movie, maybe I don't have it in me for, basically... I don't know.
You're just down a nautical nut, are you?
Right. The high seas are not my thing.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Russell Crowe, Paul Bettany, I enjoy them.
Yes,
but, man,
they play the leads.
Movie sucked.
Yeah, I disagree. I loved it. It's one of my favorite movies, honestly, of all time, I would say. It's set during the Napoleonic Wars. It is based on a book series. It's known as the Aubrey Mantrin series, which are the last names of the two lead characters, written by Patrick O'Brien. Basically, what this is doing is it's following the adventures of Captain Jack Aubrey and his friend Stephen Mantrin, which is the ship's surgeon, and they go on various adventures together. There's 20 some odd books that this guy wrote, right? The movie adaptation, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, came out in 2003, directed by Peter Weir, I believe. So Jack Aubrey, played by Russell Crowe, he's the captain of the HMS Surprise, and essentially what he's doing is pursuing a French privateer, and they known as the Acheron. That's all taking place in 1805. Really what the movie is focusing on is the relationship between the officers and the sailors. You obviously have the main two characters of Jack and Stephen. You have various encounters, various hardships, and they're pursuing this French privateer throughout the course of the movie.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
This is 20 books.
Not all of them based on chasing the Acheron.
Agreed, but there's 20 books written on this.
20 books.
Okay. Not only do I not think it needs one sequel, I definitely know it doesn't need 19 sequels.
There's a lot of material to pull from. I'll be honest with you, Garrett, I don't want to see 19 sequels either. This I don't think needs to be a series, okay? It just needs to be a sequel that is equally as well done as what the first movie was. The attention to detail is insane. It has some of the best nautical warfare brought to the screen that I've ever seen in any movie, ever. It's amazing. What I would like to see as a sequel, this is getting a little bit into the history there of the time frame, post-Napoleonic Wars, would have actually been the Battle of Navarino. So this takes place in 1827, right? Because here's the problem. It's been a long time. It's been 2003 was when Master and Commander first came out. It actually ends on a cliffhanger, which is horrible because we can't resolve this cliffhanger this much in the future.
Dang.
So, yeah, Garrett, you're really broken up about this, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, I would love to see this take place, Battle of Navarino. Essentially, this is during the Greek War of Independence, Allied forces, it was Britain, France, Russia, defeating the Ottoman Empire. Why is this important? It's one of the last major, if not the last major, nautical battle that was fought, at least in the traditional style of sailing ships fighting each other on the open waters. I think it would be really great. It'd be a spectacle. You go ahead, jump in, Garrett.
Okay, so let me start. Okay, definitely does not need a sequel. But maybe a remake set in the future, put it in space. Take the plot with the characters, make them more current or even in the future, and get yourself a space, basically battleship fighting battleship movie. That, give me 20 movies of.
That you want 20 movies of.
That sounds terrible in my opinion.
I think that you could take the complete characters. You can just take you can take the commander. You can take his nurse with him, and you can basically put them in basically 2500, basically AD, and give them spaceships and we can fight this out again. Right?
Do they still use cannonballs in space? How's that work?
Laser guns.
There you go.
Phaser
lasers.
Right.
The Last Jedi would have you think you preserve the trajectory of lobbed shells in space, but that's a story for another time.
So, if it's a sequel, You need Russell Crowe coming back.
You do. You need Paul Bettany coming back.
And Paul Bettany.
Yeah. I'll be honest, those are the main two you want to see, right?
Correct.
I want to see Paul Bettany. I want to see Russell Crowe. I threw out Liam Cunningham. He's Davos from Game of Thrones. I think he'd make a very compelling officer on the ship. What's great in this movie, too, is just looking through the cast. I'd be here all day if I read through the cast list on this thing. Pretty amazing group of talent that they brought together for this.
Yeah, I was just cheating off your notes here. That's quite an impressive list.
Yeah, well, and on these two, so I also threw out there for Henry Cavill, which might be cool as an officer of some kind, right? Bring a little star power to a sequel or even a remake set in space, right? No. So to a sequel, I think Henry Cavill would have a little bit of star power there. I apologize if I mispronounced this, but Chiwetel Ejiofor. He's been in a lot of stuff recently.
Is that the gentleman from Gladiator?
I think he'd be amazing.
Is he from Gladiator?
Is he in Gladiator? You'd have to help me out on that one. I don't think he is. I didn't think he was in Gladiator. I know he's at 12 Years a Slave. He was in...
he's the villain in the movie Four Brothers, starring Mark Wahlberg.
No kidding. I did not
Thank you,
realize.
research department.
There you go, yeah.
That's the movie where Mark Wahlberg and Tyrese are brothers,
That's right.
if you haven't seen it.
That is correct.
And then share 2 other brothers for a total of 4. Hence the title.
Hence the title, yeah. But very talented actor. I'd love to see him in more stuff, too. We'll move on past this one, guys. In my personal opinion, please go check it out. If you're good to listen to Garrett, it's a snooze fest.
Don't worry. At the end of this podcast, we're going to tell you where you can find this gem.
Totally. And I encourage you all to go out and watch it. Moving along, though, especially because these share some themes. I'm also a big Treasure Island fan, right? You guys are probably picking up on a couple of these things here. Overall, of course, original story written by Robert Louis Stevenson. There's been a ton of adaptations of this as well. If King Arthur's coming out every decade, Treasure Island adaptations are coming out on its heels every time, right? So there's a lot of them out there. Some of the most notable of them, my favorite adaptation to date, Muppet Treasure Island, starring Tim Curry and your various cast of favorite Muppet characters.
I love Tim Curry, and every Muppets movie is pretty successful.
Yes, very true. Tim Curry plays Long John Silver. It's hugely fun. It's something you can watch with your families. You can just watch it for a laugh. It's a great movie, right? There was an earlier adaptation, came out in the 90s. It actually starred Charlton Heston and a very young Christian Bale. Pretty cool. Also, kind of off the beaten path here, lesser-known adaptation that starred Eddie Izzard, a pretty well-known comedian, and Elijah Wood, believe it or not. I think it was Ben Gunn in this adaptation. So you all know him. Was that a
serious tone, or was that a comedic Treasure Island?
It was kind of a serious tone. Eddie Izzard playing Long John Silver as pretty BA.
Yeah, and Elijah Wood's not funny.
No, he's not. Yeah.
in any role?
In any role,
yeah.
Okay.
I have a question. As somebody who read the book or seen any of these movies, what's the plot?
Yeah, I'll break it down a bit for you. So, story begins. An old sailor, his name's Billy Bones. There's a good pirate name for you, right? So he arrives at the Admiral Benbow Inn, and where he pays the son of the innkeep, his name's Jim Hawkins, to look out for a one-legged seafaring man. So, obviously, this comes to play later when he meets Long John, right? There's a blind man named Pew at the beginning. He essentially advises Billy that he needs to give up the location of the treasure, essentially. But Billy suffers a stroke and he dies. So they go to unlock his treasure chest and they find in there a journal and a map. And they soon learn that that's going to lead them to the buried treasure of Captain Flint. And so that's kind of how the series of events unfolds. To skip ahead a little bit, there's a mutiny involved. Okay, Long John Silver's part of the mutiny. You have this dynamic between Jim Hawkins and Long John Silver because Jim Hawkins had kind of grown to trust Long John Silver in a way. So you have this betrayal dynamic going on, not only between Long John Silver and Jim Hawkins, but the actual mutiny that's led against the ship that's going to find the treasure as well. So,
and I do believe, because I read up a little bit on this, that this the book more than the movies brings a lot of what we think of pirate lore to the forefront.
It does.
Peg legs, X marks the spot.
Yep.
Parrots,
eye patches, the whole bit.
Basically, the concept of what we think of as a pirate exists because of this book.
Exactly. That's a very, very good point worth noting because it's going to spawn a lot of things from there too. A lot of the success, I would argue, of the Pirates franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean.
And that's what I want to bring up because I feel like that has become the benchmark for pirate movies as far as success, at least the first couple, maybe first two. They kind of trailed off. I have a hard time thinking that, because when you think of Jack Sparrow in that performance by Johnny Depp. It is a very good performance, and I think when you think of pirate, you think of him now. And I feel like because the pirates exist, that this can't exist. I just feel like it's almost like it's the same story. You got the mutiny between Barbossa and Jack Sparrow over the ship, but they're still looking for the gold. They're always looking for treasure in that series. I just feel like that it can't supersede this. The Pirates of the Caribbean basically is basically the updated version of Treasure Island.
Or it's a lore setter. As far as you just almost copy paste, twist a few things from Treasure Island, and you kind of got a very similar type plot, or at least the groundwork for the new Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes, but I would point out that the Pirates of the Caribbean basically got worse as they went along. Successfully worse, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, commercially, the first one was very successful. The second one was probably successful. I don't have box office numbers, but the third one, not very good. The fourth one, not very good at all. And I think they're even to the point where they're about to reboot it again without Jack Sparrow.
Yes.
Right? So I just don't know if I don't know if Treasure Island will exist in today because of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Sure. And I think that's a great point to bring up. And that actually ties in to why I think it could be. Here's why. There's been a lot of controversy with Johnny Depp as well as Jeffrey Rush, who played Barbossa. Okay? Regardless of how that stands, it seems like the future of Pirates of the Caribbean might be in jeopardy for if they're going to continue this franchise. I think we should wait a little bit, kind of like our King Arthur comments, right? Probably let things die down. But it might be a good time to bring some new pirate lore to the big screen.
So you're arguing to not reboot Pirates of the Caribbean this fast, but to make Treasure Island.
Make this the next thing again. Yes. Reason why you could make your own pirate stories. It doesn't have to be based on Treasure Island or the existing franchise that is Pirates of the Caribbean. So you can certainly do that, but I think that's where, I don't know how Hollywood executives have these board meetings, but Treasure Island, it has that name recognition.
Right.
So if they are looking to reboot a pirate franchise,
okay,
it might be worth investigating to do that.
Okay. So let me ask this, though. Yeah. So one thing Hollywood does, and we know they do this, they try to make everything a sequel. They want they don't just want one movie, they want 4 movies, right?
Very true.
Can this story be more than one movie? Because if it can't, they're not going to make this, right? I feel like if Treasure Island can be a standalone movie, great. But if they can't make this 2 or 3 like trilogy minimum, this isn't. They're going to go to the Pirates because they can reboot that world, and they're going to get 3 movies out of it.
Very true. And here's where the end of the book sets that up perfectly. If they would want to do it, as it exists, it's almost the perfect story in the sense that it tells everything that it needs to tell. It has the character development, and at the very end, it has a very natural lead into a sequel. Reason being, Jim Hawkins at the end leaves with the crew, that's the good guys essentially, right? They escape the island. They leave with the treasure that they can carry. Jim says he will never return to the island for what remains. It's a passing comment, if I remember correctly, but essentially he's saying there's more treasure on the island. So if you really wanted to, you could, I think, have a very successful standalone movie, focus on your plot, deliver a good story, and then it very naturally does set up the fact that, well, hey, what if a different group of people go looking for that treasure? So it could very well spawn a series of sequels if they wanted it to, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Who would star?
Who would star? Great questions. I have a couple different options here. I thought of Brendan Gleeson, actually, as Long John Silver. Thought that might be cool. I think he can play a surly yet kind of friendly pirate, because that's what Mad Eye is.
Correct.
In a way, right?
Yes.
Mad Eye reminded me so much of Long John Silver, except Mad Eye Moody's actually a good guy, right? But I digress. I also thought maybe Rory McCann would be a good choice for Long John Silver. He plays the Hound from Game of Thrones. So he might be almost too imposing, though. He's a pretty big guy, right? But he did cross my mind. Here's one I really do want to have happen. Tom Holland is Jim Hawkins. Most recent Spider-Man, right? Yeah. I think it's probably tough to find someone who can play that role, because Jim Hawkins is pretty young, so he can play that role, but with enough charisma to make it believable and to make you want to root for him. I think that's a tough thing for younger actors to probably be able to pull off, right? I think Tom Holland has proved that he can do it. Obviously, he's probably, in his early 20s now, so he'd be playing yet again a teenager. He's
Sure.
doing that with Spider-Man already.
He has a very young look to him.
He does, yeah. But I think he pull it off. I think he'd do a good job with it. Joe Dempsey also was Ben Gunn. I know I'm referencing a lot of Game of Thrones, but there's just so many good actors on Game of Thrones. He plays Gendry on Game of Thrones with the hammer.
Got it.
Yep, the blacksmith.
Yep.
But I thought he'd make a good Ben Gunn. So there's a couple other roles, of course. We could debate about those, but just a couple picks that I've got in regard to that.
So vote on this, Nate. Do you want a remake of Treasure Island?
That's another one where I'm not really invested in the series. I'm going to have to abstain to that.
Let me preface it this way then.
Yeah.
Would you want Hollywood to make and reboot Pirates of the Caribbean, which you have seen, or do you think they need to go away from it and do a more fresh look pirate movie? And they can, obviously, Treasure Island has built all of pirate lore to Hollywood. Could they rebuild or remake or reboot a Treasure Island movie, trilogy, series over Pirates of the Caribbean?
I would rather see a remake of Treasure Island than I would a sequel to the series.
Not a sequel. They would reboot it.
Or a reboot for that matter. Honestly, I think the only thing that makes that series stand on its own is Jack Sparrow. And if they don't have him in that, just forget about it. Just go for Treasure Island.
Agreed. I think that if you don't have Jack Sparrow, and specifically Johnny Depp playing Jack Sparrow, I don't want to see it either. And not even that. I saw the last one, or at least halfway through the last one. Even he was in it.
Yep.
Still wasn't good. But I don't want to see Pirates without him.
Fair enough. I think those are all great points to bring up. I kind of land with you in regard to that, too. I think Pirates of the Caribbean, loved it when it first came out. I think it's probably reached the end of its run. I want to see more pirates on the big screen, right? I don't think Pirates of the Caribbean is the vehicle to do it with.
Correct.
So, yep. Cool. Well, hey, we'll keep moving right along here. I just got a couple more. Next one, this is pretty timely because of the new, now, it is a remake that happened, Hellboy. Just simply titled Hellboy. This is coming out very soon here this year, I believe in April. This is when the new Hellboy movie is coming out. I'm here to talk, though, about the sequel that never was, Hellboy 3. If any of you listening are fans of Hellboy, I'm sure you are very familiar with this situation. They've recently rebooted it with David Harbour, most notable from Stranger Things, although he's got actually quite a extensive list of things he's been in as an actor. So he's a very talented actor. I'm not here to root against him. I'm excited to see it. I really am. I think David Harbour's still going to do a good job. The problem I have with it is that, Ron Perlman is just so hard to beat. And you had Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro, the director, campaigning so hard to get Hellboy 3 made.
And no one smokes a cigar like Ron Perlman.
That's very true. So it's going to be so hard from a studio perspective to overcome fan demand and completely set that aside and be like, nope, we're doing our own thing because gritty superhero movies are where it's at right now. We're rating it R. We'll add some blood. We'll add some swearing and call it a day. And I hope they don't lean into that too much.
Yeah, and you know what's kind of funny is bringing up Ron Perlman. When I think of Hellboy, clearly I think of Ron Perlman, right? Because that's the only incarnation we have of him so far.
Yeah.
However, when I watch Sons of Anarchy and I see Ron Perlman on there as Clay, part of me, when I hear him talk, because you only get to see Hellboy's, you only really get to hear his voice.
Yeah.
I think Hellboy all the time.
Oh,
like
it's so iconic.
It's really funny. It's really great, right? It's watching Jax talk to Hellboy. It's actually what it seems like.
King Arthur's talking to
Hellboy.
Talking to
Hellboy. That's right. I liked Hellboy a lot. Hellboy 2 was okay. Golden Army. That was a fine movie. It was a good sequel. I just don't see David Harbour having the charisma that Ron Perlman has with this.
It's gonna be so hard to pull off. I want it to do so well. I'm such a big Hellboy fan.
I feel like Ron Perlman's kind of an all or nothing type actor in that role. Whether you either really love him or you hate him. There's no in between where you're like, yeah, he's okay or whatever. You either are on one side of the fence or the other with him.
He's got that great nonchalant aspect of the character down.
He does.
Whatever, I'll do what I want. Okay, let's do it. Okay, now we're gonna kill everybody, right? But I feel like that's what made Hellboy so great. And I'm not a fan of the comic, never read it, so my only viewpoint of Hellboy is the movies, and I thought they were great. I thought he was awesome, and I'm not. To be fair, I'm also not a big David Harbour fan.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I'm skeptical of this performance that he'll put on. Mm-hmm. I will watch it, because I will give it that fair shake. But again, Ron Perlman, when he smokes a cigar, he's not going to beat Ron Perlman.
Yeah, I agree. This is such an uphill climb, and I genuinely wish them the best because I love it. This is one of the few franchises. I love Marvel, I love DC. I can't say I've read anywhere close to enough of the comics to be any authority whatsoever on comparing the movie franchises to the existing comics. Hellboy, I do read the comics. They're amazing. I think Ron Perlman did a great job. Guillermo del Toro and team of writers did a great job in general of bringing that story to the big screen. What they did so great, and this ties back to our character conversation that we had, right? He brings the spirit of those characters while he still was able to tell his own story. He certainly adapted parts of the comics, right, to the series, but he was still able to successfully tell his own story. We'll keep moving along here. I'll skip over the synopsis of that first Hellboy movie. The big takeaways from Hellboy 2, because they clearly set this up to be a trilogy. So the biggest takeaway from Hellboy 2 is he's mortally wounded. Prince Nuada is the nemesis, essentially the bad guy. He's one of the greatest villains, I think, greatest comic book villains, I'll clarify a little bit there, that I've seen brought to screen. And this was a character created for the screen as well. I don't think he has a comic book counterpart. But he's played by Luke Goss. He has been in very little else, but I think he does a great job. Essentially, he mortally wounds Hellboy, right? Fast forward a little bit. They actually encounter the Angel of Death, who is actually played by the same guy who does Abe Sapien, who also did the fish creature in Shape of Water. Doug Jones is his name. Great monster character actor, so to speak. But anyway, Angel of Death provides Liz Sherman with a choice. He says that you can either save Hellboy, but if you do, he's essentially going to bring about the apocalypse, or you can let him die, and when he dies, humanity essentially would be saved. Liz Sherman, without hesitating, who is his love interest in this series, without hesitating says, no, save him. So she has Hellboy be saved. They go through, they save the day at the end of Hellboy 2 as a movie, but you have this huge hanging plot thread, right? Of the fact that she's made a life-altering decision that could potentially bring about the end of humanity. So I would love to see that happen. Just a couple things, too, that I found were really interesting. This was back in 2008, so keep in mind, this is off the heels of Hellboy 2. Guillermo del Toro, the director, told IGN in an interview that, I would love to finish the story of this incarnation of Hellboy in a rather bittersweet way, del Toro told IGN. We did have ideas for the third one that were quite heartbreaking. The third one would be essentially the end of days. It'd be very grand, operatic, and quite tragic. I want to see that.
Agreed.
I want to see the end of how his vision was, right? In 2013, fast forward a few years, Ron Perlman this time said that Del Toro had, quotes, a very well-articulated idea of what the resolve would look like, and it's amazingly theatrical and is epic in scope and would make for amazing cinema with or without the first two movies. So he was saying this during the Q&A session of 2013 C2E2, which is essentially a kind of a Comic-Con convention in Chicago, essentially, back in 2013. These guys were campaigning so hard for it. It just kind of bums me out that they didn't ever get enough support from the studios to actually make this thing happen.
Huh. And I wonder why, because I remember Hellboy 2 was commercially successful.
It was. Yeah, it was well received by fans and critics overall, I think.
So have you looked into why they are not making a sequel versus rebooting it?
Yeah, he tweeted out a while back, this might have been in 2017, I want to say at this point, that he was essentially had met with members of the studio, and he could 100% confirm that it was not going to happen. I did not see exact reasons as to why. I think that it's been so much time since the first series that might have something to do with it. Ron Perlman's in his, I think, late 60s now.
Yeah, he is old, and David Arbor is much more in the present mind because of Stranger Things.
Exactly.
But I'll be honest, nothing in Stranger Things makes me think of him being Hellboy.
I'm glad you brought that up. There's one scene where David Harbour, I think it's the first time we meet his character in season 1, and he's drinking the beer from the night before while smoking a cigarette and trying to take his meds with the beer that was left out the night before.
Sure.
And in that one sequence, I'm like, okay, there's Hellboy without the makeup.
Yeah, but the rest of the series, I'm thinking to myself, that's not Hellboy.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's me, personally.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Nate, what do you think?
I like, for this series myself, it's one of those series that if it's on TV, I would consider it like a TNT series. So back in the day when you're flipping the channels and you see it, I like it enough that I would not change the channel and I would watch it till the end. But I don't go out of my way to check the listings and try to find it and then go buy the movie. But I do really enjoy the movie. I like watching it, especially the action and Nuada in the second one.
Yeah.
There's some awesome action scenes in there.
Definitely.
And especially, it is a good take on a comic book character for the attitude that he just goes throughout the stories with.
Definitely.
It's a nice new take for it.
I agree. And keep in mind, too, I mean, practical effects and how they were using these films was just insane. It was unbelievable. Guillermo del Toro and his monster workshop, essentially, they do such a phenomenal job of making these worlds believable. Add into that these movies came out pre-MCU, or at least right. The second one, I think, came out actually maybe the same year as the first Iron Man did, I want to say. So keep in mind, these movies were right there with that original Spider-Man trilogy and X-Men, kind of paving the way that, hey, these comic book movies are a thing. They're here to stay. And look at the success that some of these other franchises have had, too.
Yeah,
so,
agreed.
I mean, I won't break down too much from here in terms of what I want to see from the plot. Obviously, I want most of these characters to return that were cast in the existing two movies, so I'm not going to go through a bunch of, who would we cast? I want most of them to return, right? I'd like for them, something I did think would be cool. I love that character of Prince Nuada so much. I don't know if it'd be kind of cheap or cheesy to do this. I'd love to have a way to bring him back, where him and Hellboy would have to team up to somehow stop the apocalypse from happening. It's not beyond the realm of possibility to do this in comic book movies. Hellboy's died in the comics. Of course he's brought back to life, right? So you can do this, I would imagine, with Prince Nuada as well. I just think it would be cool. They both want to save the Earth in different ways, right? Prince Nuada wants to wipe out all humanity and make it a safe place to live for fairy folk, essentially. Hellboy wants to save it for all humanity. So unlikely people teaming up against the apocalypse. I think that would have been a cool thing to see.
I think what I want is Hellboy to turn villain and somehow bring him back. I need him to turn into with the long horns and the flame in the middle. I need him to go full villain and start doing some damage. And I need somebody, even a new character, somebody to bring him back.
Totally.
And I think that's what I want. And I agree. Nate, do you agree we want a sequel versus the reboot? You want Ron Perlman or Dave Barker?
I split the fence on this one because I'm very interested to see what they do with the new character, the darker version of it. Mila Jovovich.
Oh, that's right.
Is the new villain the Blood Queen?
The Blood Queen.
Is it supposed to be darker? Do we know that?
Very much so. Yeah.
Ooh,
so that's also, I think, maybe why they wanted to reboot it, because of the whole gritty superhero thing that's working right now. There's going to be a lot of gore. It's going to be a hard R, is what they've said it's going to be.
Oh, then retract everything I've said so far.
So you can anticipate a lot of changes from what I would call your friendly neighborhood Hellboy with Ron Perlman. It's going to be way darker, is what they're promising anyway.
Well, now I'm excited to see it.
I'm excited too. I hope it does.
I was a hard yes for the remake, the original, but now that you told me about this plot sequel, now I'm a little more interested. And like I said, I split the fence. Now I kind of want to see how he wanted to end his series.
Now listen, it's no Master and Commander.
I hear you there. It might run a little short of 3 hours and 30 minutes, but...
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Something else worth noting, too, the comic books that this plot line will pull from for Nimue the Blood Queen actually uses part of the Arthurian legend in it, too. Fun fact. Moving on, I think we should push on to our last one here. This would be a remake of The Wild Wild West.
I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, so I want this one. Definitely want you guys to jump in on this. Give me your thoughts and opinions. The overall movie, super brief synopsis, all right? Obviously, Jim West.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to hear the synopsis too about the plot on this.
No, I'm just gonna break it down in the most simplified way possible.
Can you do it with the same charisma that Will Smith would do it?
I don't think I could pull that off. No.
and don't laugh either.
Yeah. So Jim West and Artemis Gordon must save President Grant from Dr. Lovelace, and they go through various.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Various encounters that are over the top and insane, and the movie's just bonkers. What do you guys think? Help me out here. It's clear I was not a fan of this. I grew up watching the remakes, or not even the remakes, I'm sorry. I grew up watching the original The Wild Wild West series before I saw this, so that was what I was anticipating. Obviously, I got something different. I don't think you guys have seen the original series. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what do you guys think? What was your takeaway from this?
This is if the movie's on TV, I might watch it if I see it. I'm not, like Nate said, similarly to Hellboy, I'm not searching this movie out. This, as far as a Will Smith performance goes, I mean, I know where you're going to go with the discussion on this as far as watching the show. So our idea of what Jim West will be is different than what your idea of Jim West will be.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim West, to me, going forward, to really probably the majority of the population, is Will Smith and his portrayal of it. And I feel like if they're going to reboot this series, they're going to have to go with a guy similar to him. Because I feel like if it's a comedy. And I feel like they have to make it and keep it a comedy. Thoughts, Nate?
We talked about this a little bit before the podcast about what kind of studio is sitting inside of a think tank and going, what do we have the rights to? And how can we twist that to a new demographic? And you sit there with the Wild Wild West rights and you're going, what would make this cool nowadays? Steampunk, spiders, and we need to mix them all together into the 1800s. I don't know how some of these ideas come to fruition, but it cracks me up how a movie gets made. And yep, I'll invest millions of dollars into that. That sounds like a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, as a really big fan right now of anything Cowboy.
Right, exactly.
Right, because my character in Red Dead Redemption.
Of things Cowboy
right
now.
So I get to work my horseback now, right?
Yeah.
I'm all for a Western. I'm all for a modernized Western, like, set in the mid 1800s. I like the idea of keeping it with grants. If they're going to be Secret Service and protecting them, or you can even go a little bit further up if you want. You can go to Hayes if you want. I think that our ideas of this, you want this to be a serious remake, like a darker version of it.
I don't even want to say darker per se, because the original series was not overly dark by any means.
So then explain to us what you're looking for.
Yeah, essentially, I am looking for it to be a little bit more serious, yes. I don't want to say a gritty reboot. I don't like that. It doesn't need to be a gritty reboot. But to set the tone a little bit more serious, don't set out to make it an action comedy. Set out to make it an action movie with comedy. I think it's worth distinguishing between those two things. It might be nitpicky, but I think it's worth distinguishing between those. Have some comedic relief, certainly.
Sure.
But still have the tone be a little bit closer to James Bond movie. Specifically, I'm envisioning, so I guess this is a little bit of a gritty reboot, but specifically Daniel Craig's version of James Bond, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I envision Jim West as being. In the original series, a lot of the TV shows at the time, they actually started to transition away from so many Westerns, right? A ton of Westerns that were out at the time, into spy shows. So they sat down, they said, hey, how can we update Westerns to make them more influential currently on TV? This was in the late 60s. So they said, hey, how about we take James Bond to the West? Wild Wild West is born. They actually have steampunk. It's some of the first interpretations of the genre of steampunk on screen at the time. So a lot of these crazy plots, these crazy things that happen in the movie, actually, some of that's pretty cool. Maybe not the giant spider thing. I could have done without the giant steampunk spider, right? But they have steampunk robot men in this show. They have plots to overthrow the world and the government. They have surgeries being done to change the way people's faces look so that they can kind of take over and subvert the current authorities. There's all kinds of weird, supernatural, fictional things going on in the original series as well. So I think there's a lot of material there to remake it, make it a little bit more serious. Don't lose all the comedy. I want some comedy too. Don't lose all that, but make it a little bit more serious in tone and really ramp up some of the cool things. Ramp up the cooler gadgets, right? Make him the James Bond of the West and deliver on it. That's what I want to see.
Okay.
The lead is, I know you wanted to discuss that as well. So yeah.
Let's go to that.
Yeah.
I want to know who you wanted to be cast in this movie.
You brought up some great points. We talked about this beforehand. My original leads that came to mind were actually Anson Mount as Jim West, because my mind immediately went to people who's been successful in Western so far, right? That's where my mind jumped.
Yeah,
Anson Mount.
Val Kilmer.
Yeah, Val Kilmer. Yeah, there you go. So I initially thought Anson Mount is Jim West. He's from Hell on Wheels. He plays Cullen Bohannon, the main lead in Hell on Wheels. Check it out. Also a great Western if you're looking to try out a Western or look into a Western. Timothy Olyphant as Artemis Gordon. I don't think he's necessarily... Garrett, you'd mentioned the charisma factor. I love Timothy Olyphant. I don't know if he's Jim West, though.
I love Timothy Olyphant as well. But again, to the majority of people, Artemis is the real comedic part of this movie, right? He's the guy that's doing all the gadgets. He's the Q of the show.
He is the Q of the show. It's absolutely what he is.
I don't see Timothy Oliphant tinkering around.
Fair enough.
Right? When I see Timothy Oliphant, he's Raylan Givens, right?
Yeah, it was just that.
Yeah, which is an awesome show.
Yeah.
I just don't see him being a tech-savvy guy. I see him being the shoot first, ask questions later. But my bigger issue with it is the majority of people think of Will Smith as Jim West. So my question is, does the remake, will this go over with a white lead?
It's a great topic to bring up, and you got me thinking about this too. And I thought, I just saw a movie not too long ago that while overall it wasn't received well, this actor really shined in this role, Idris Elba. Specifically referring to The Dark Tower as an adaptation from the book to the screen. Not a fan. As Idris Elba in that role of a gunslinger, awesome.
And it's ironic you bring up Idris Elba because he's rumored to be the next James Bond.
I know, there have been some rumors about him as the next James Bond.
This is, not to make this a more controversial topic or a deeper dive, but when we do remakes or reboots or sequels, to be true to character, is Jim West originally was played by a white man?
True, yes.
But the majority of population in the reboot, Will Smith was played by a black man. So how much controversy do we really kick up if he goes back and he's played by another white man now?
Yeah.
And then is it going to be commercially successful? Similarly to, there's a lot of people that want to see Idris Elba play James Bond, and there's also a lot of people that don't want to see Idris Elba play James Bond. We can debate that later.
Yeah.
But that's my biggest gripe with it is, with Anson Mount, is I think you need someone. I think Idris Elba could play Jim West.
Yep.
I also think a Michael B. Jordan could play Jim West.
That'd be a good one, too.
What about, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He plays T'Challa in Black Panther. I don't remember.
Great suggestion.
The main character, sorry. Don't have his name. I don't know. I think you got to go with that. I think that he's... Because it's not that we're switching a character. We're talking difference of generations here. Mm-hmm. So to one generation, Jim West looks like this. To the majority of the generation now, Jim West looks like this. So you can make the argument there was so much time in between the show and the movie. Mm-hmm. The Jim West is changed now. He is a different character. So going forward, to be true to him, he's got to be that charismatic comedy gunslinger, in my opinion, to be true to who he is now.
To your point, Joe, on the Timothy Oliphant casting, I like that from the standpoint of, I know you assume him as a man of action, right? Because that's his main role in Justified, the series, and he plays it so well. What's the other movie? Hitman? He plays awesome in Hitman.
He's the villain in the Die Hard, Live Free or Die Hard movie. He's the villain.
Yep.
Right. It's hard to see him playing second fiddle to Jim West, but the one contention I would say is that the dry humor that I think he could portray through the screen as Artemis Gordon, I think that'd be work really well for that particular character.
Definitely. I think that's a great point to bring up. I also threw out there Peter Dinklage as Miguelito Loveless.
I think that's a great one, and I think because Loveless was a dwarf, not in a wheelchair, right?
Correct.
Did not have legs.
He's
right?
He's one of the main villains in the original series as well. Similar in that sense, in the fact that he's a villain in the remake, of course, with Will Smith.
I think that's an excellent one.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome. I mean, Peter Dinklage is amazing talent, and I'd love to see him.
Everybody buys him as a mastermind.
Yes,
right, and as a politically savvy character, right? Obviously, Game of Thrones. That's exactly what his character is. He's believable in that role. So I think that he would be a great, basically, evil mastermind.
Totally agree. Someone I threw out in the original series, I believe in the remake as well, is Antoinette is basically Loveless's assistant in a way. So that, I think, is an opportunity to update that, right?
Okay.
Update that a little bit more. Catherine Zeta-Jones actually came to mind. I think she'd be awesome in that role. But obviously, give her more to do. Make her an active part of this movie, which I think is very important to do. Another thing, too, he came up before. You can tell I want to see him in more movies, but Chiwetel Ejiofor again. I thought, along with Idris Elba, him as maybe an Artemis Gordon character. I think that would be cool, too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this could definitely get a remake. I think commercially this wasn't exactly as successful as they wanted it.
Yep.
And it's really interesting because I did a little research into this movie. Originally, Tom Cruise, they wanted to be Jim West.
Yeah, you mentioned that. That's really interesting.
He ended up turning into Mission Impossible 1. They looked at George Clooney, which just I don't think he just pulls it off. Like I said, I think that Will Smith...
What year was it made? Because George Clooney would have been late 90s?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe 99?
Maybe 99?
No, because Mission Impossible 1 wasn't 99. 95?
You're right, though. 99. For Wild Wild West, are we talking about Wild Wild West?
Sorry, yeah, they were originally talking about making it in 95. Sorry.
Oh.
And I believe he did Mission Impossible 1.
I missed
no,
that.
Sorry,
I'm
sorry. That might even be 92 that they were like first trying to make the film. Like, it was that long of a process to actually get the film made. Like I said, they went through different directors. They went through George Clooney originally being on it. So I just, like I said, going back to it, I think a remake's fine. I just think that you have so much representation of young black actors who I think would be very successful in that persona of what most people think of Jim West. And I just think that that's where they have to go with that.
I think that's a great idea. And this, to circle everything back to the very first part we talked about, preserve the character.
Right.
And those are all excellent choices. I think they do a great job of not only carrying on Will Smith's legacy, which is certainly attached to this now, but also still being able to channel the original Jim West from the original series.
Okay, let's take this step. So what if instead of having Wild Wild West exist with Jim West and Artemis Gordon, can we create this world with new characters? Like Will Smith could show up as a cameo. He could be Jim West, but he's older now. Maybe he's even in the movie. He's kind of an older gun. Maybe even partner him with a young Artemis Gordon, like a younger sidekick, like a younger Q. Or just have two new actors portray characters in this world, not necessarily Jim West, Artemis Gordon. I don't know.
I think that fits really well. And if you watch some of the James Bond where the new young, is it Q?
Yep.
Takes over and kind of has that new interaction with, the old James Bond.
Yeah.
I think it's a good transition between character actors there.
It worked for Men in Black, right? As far as the story, right? Between Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith, and obviously, right?
Yeah, that's a remake coming out too, by the way.
It sure is, you're right.
I think of all the movies you brought up, and we can recap like what we think. I think that this one, I think most people would go to see this one. I think this would be the most successful of your remakes or sequels.
Awesome.
Do you think that would work?
I think so. Yeah. I think it probably had the most. Guess and say that this probably had the most commercial success.
Yeah.
Hellboy 2 probably a very close second. But I think there's a big enough world out there that they can build upon, and they haven't developed enough that there aren't so many lingering issues that they couldn't kind of mix in the new characters like you had mentioned, Garrett.
Yeah, I agree.
And I 100% agree too. Honestly, out of the 5 that we've discussed, whether remakes or sequels, this is the one I would want to see the most. It really is. Just like you said, Garrett, I mean, I'm big into Cowboys right now. I've always been a fan of Cowboys, but now it's on overdrive because of Red Dead Redemption primarily,
I totally agree.
So, yes, this is definitely my top pick. Okay. I'd love to see them delve into this world again. I think the idea of using new characters within the existing world, I think that would definitely work. I think that's awesome.
And I do think most of your movies, at least 4 of them, sounded interesting. I think one of them is just crap. I want Nate's going to tell you where you can locate all these movies if you want to watch them, which we would love for you guys to watch them. Maybe give us some feedback. We'll tell you where you can reach us here in a second.
So if you're into sailing, Russell Crowe, naval battles, and you want to watch Master and Commander, it's available on YouTube and Amazon Prime. If you're into watching The Legend of the Sword, that's on Amazon for $10. iTunes for $6. King Arthur is on Prime for $3. First Night, Prime for $3. Hellboy is available free on Netflix if you're a subscriber there. Wild Wild West is on Prime for $2. Muppet Treasure Island for $3 on Prime. And then Treasure Island on Amazon for $10. And just as a kind of a prelude into our next episode, the original, I think 1984 Batman with Tim Burton.
89.
89. That would have been a little early. 1989 Batman is on Amazon for $4. So if you're interested, go check that out before the next episode next week.
And The Dark Knight is on Netflix right now, I believe.
I believe so.
So that brings us to what our next episode is going to be. So definitely, Joe, thank you for your 5 remake sequels.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. This was fun.
In the future, Nate and I will be doing a similar episode down the road. Nothing planned just yet. Next week, though, we are going to break down The Joker, specifically within the realm of the 89 Burton film and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. We're only going to keep it to these 2 movies, comparing and contrasting the characters, which one we like more, who we think pulls it off better, who we think represents the Joker. In the meantime, again, we love that you guys subscribe. Go back and give us a rating, 5 stars, leave us a review. You can get us at Twitter on @AlienandCowboy. If you want to email us feedback, we're at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. Other than that, like I said, we really enjoy your guys' feedback. It makes us feel like we're, that we have people that really like what we're doing. We like to hear it because it brings a different perspective to us.
Definitely.
Even if you don't like what you're doing, we still like to hear that feedback, so at least we can talk about it, try to make fixes. If not,
yeah, when you watch
take it into consideration.
Yeah, if you got 6 hours, watch Master and Commander and tell Joe how crap it is. He'll love it.
Or just, remind Garrett how wrong he is about the whole thing.
Yeah. Until then, guys, we'll see you next week again. We got the Joker next week. Hope to hear from you. If not, you guys, everybody have a good night. Cheers.
Cheers.